Pause with me for a moment of prayer. O God, in whom we live and move and have our being, I ask now that you would bless the words of my lips and the meditations of all of our hearts, that they might find their source in you, our rock and our strength. Amen. I have this urge to ask June Charlton to stand up and lean against the post back there to make sure that I'm enunciating and projecting far enough, as I did when I was about 13 or 14 years old. There's a nervousness to being here again, not because I fear anything, but simply the flood of memories I feel coming back to me this morning. I want to say thanks to Reverend Stephen Fram and to the worship committee for inviting me to be here this morning, to be the anniversary preacher this 166th year of Grace United Church. Grace Church being light of God's love here in downtown Dartmouth. I looked back in my notes and I discovered that I was the anniversary preacher here almost 15 years ago. So either I did such a wonderful job the last time you invited me back, or you're giving me a second shot to do it again, this time better. I noted in the brief biography that Stephen asked me to send how I have been and how I was shaped by Grace United Church in so many ways. First and foremost, as a person of faith. Next, as a member in the United Church of Canada. And finally, as a member of the Order of Ministry. And I am forever so grateful to the saints that are here and the saints in light that surround us this morning as we gather. So many things have changed here and in the world since I came to the official board and asked them to help me discern a call to ministry. When I was going through confirmation at about 14 years old here, Ron Dixon was the minister, and one day after confirmation class, he looked at me and said, "Michael, you should consider ministry at some point in time." And I tucked it in my back pocket, and I pictured myself going off and being a teacher for a number of years and then perhaps coming back to it. But as with so many things, God's call on us is sometimes unavoidable, and we follow. And so, as I walked a path of discernment and candidacy and study and finally ordination in 1999, I was struck by the history of grace and how it's contributed to my faith and the faith of so many people. I'm still reminded of how our journey as the church and as a people of faith is one in which we are all at the same time part of the past, part of the present, and part of the future. We're part of the past because, as Lorna shared with us this morning, we're shaped by it. So much of what Grace United Church is found in its Methodist roots. Everything from the way the front of the church is structured, except for the communion rail, which is supposed to be down there, I'm sure John Wesley would have told us. But that's okay. Yeah. In all of my life here, it has always been up here. So we're shaped by the company of the saints in light, as I said, who once walked with us, who laid the foundations that are both spiritual and physical for us to build on. The Methodists who came and built Grace Methodist Church in 1853 and who rebuilt it in 1920 and later became members of Grace United Church in 1925 are, as Lorna said, you stole my thunder, the bricks and mortar of this building, but their voices echo in this space and in this congregation. Their spirits sing and their hearts are still with us as we gather in this place to find community. You who regularly worship here and now are about the work of discerning the call of God's mission and ministry in this place and in this community. At the same time, we're all shaping what our United Church of Canada will be in the years to come. So I believe we can and we should look to the Methodists who gathered here, to the Presbyterians who gathered at St. James, to the Congregationalists who gathered in churches all over this province, as examples of a way in which we can build a new church. As in 2019, we engaged in the work of building a new United Church of Canada with its new form and structure. We will be examples to those who will look back on us from the future. They will undoubtedly need to do again in the time to come what we have been about, as our Methodist forebearers had to be about, because the world around us will continually change in so many ways. Through it all, however, we hold to the constancy of our faith. We hold in our trust in God. We hold to the teachings of Jesus. And we follow the movement of the Spirit, drawing us, nudging us, giving us a kick in the butt once in a while, and calling us into God's future. The author of the Gospel, according to Luke, recounts an experience of Jesus' followers as Jesus' ministry begins to come to its close. And his followers are wondering, what's going to happen next? What will our little band of followers look like? The clouds for Jesus of danger and change are gathering. He and his followers are in and around Jerusalem, and they begin to speak of the temple and its magnificent presence, that it creates a focal point not only in the city, both physically but also spiritually as well. Jesus may have spoken these words as prophetic, but the first hearers of Luke's gospel, likely living in Antioch, knew the destruction of the temple. And they knew that the Jewish and neo-Christian communities in Jerusalem were living through its aftermath in this huge time of upheaval and change. And it's very likely that this fledgling Christian community in Antioch saw themselves as living out the very words that were being read in the community when you hear of wars and insurrections and rumors of wars. That those weren't idle words. Domitian, the emperor in Rome at the time, was becoming increasingly more and more paranoid and intent on keeping absolute power. And his work and his words struck fear in the hearts of many people, likely the hearers of Luke's gospel. And I can imagine they saw Jesus' words as truly prophetic and reflective at the same time of the world around them. As they gathered, as they worshiped, as they broke bread and prayed together, I imagine like we do today, wonder, what does the future hold for us? Where will God's Spirit speak to us next? Where would God lead this fledgling community into the future? And so they had to hold on to the tension that exists between the fear in the now and the hope in the not yet. We call that inaugurated eschatology. There's your $1 million word for the day. Inaugurated eschatology, holding the tension between the fear of what we see happening around us and the hope that God holds out for us in the future. And so it's apt that the passage from Isaiah this morning would be chosen and paired with Luke's gospel, because it speaks directly to the prophet's vision of God's future. The images of the passage have become so familiar to so many of us. That image of the peaceable kingdom, marked by the renewal of both heaven and earth, where the wolf and the lamb feed together, and the lion and the ox both eat straw. This dream of the third contributor to the book of Isaiah likely penned around the time when the Hebrew people were returning from captivity in Babylon. The words give language to the hopes of those people. Hopes of those returning exiles, that the dream that they must have held within them for so long as they were in exile might soon be coming true as they moved closer and closer. That they might see God's work unfolding in their sight. And they were caught up in the vision. And were able to hold that tension between the now and the not yet. The new heaven and the new earth. The possibility of God being in their midst, and yet at the same time calling them to a future. Inaugurated eschatology. And so now Grace celebrates 166 years of faith and presence in this downtown core of Dartmouth, where you live out your vision as a community. I found on your website these words, called by God to live and nurture our faith. Living God's vision challenges us to respect all creation, love each other as Christ loves us, and with courageous love, defend human dignity and resist forces that exploit and marginalize. That's amazing. What a vision. The passage from Luke reminds us that there are always going to be times of fear and change and uncertainty. We're going to see those things as we look at the worldview around us, much like what we see happening in so many places today. Though our issues may be a little bit more modern, they are the same at heart. Modern issues that need to be addressed and stood against, such as gender violence and prejudice and xenophobia, the crisis that is climate change, and so many other things. That fear of those things, however, must always be coupled with the vision from the prophets like Isaiah, who remind us that God is still among the people, calling us to catch God's vision and God's hope. As you celebrate the path which has been laid before you, as you live Christ's call to serve in the world and to vision where the Spirit calls you next, I again turn to your website, seeking to find hope in the promise of God found in Scripture, not as an escape from responsibility, but as a call to action. As Grace celebrates where it has been, and at the same time looks forward where God is calling us all to follow in hope. These too are truly prophetic words. My prayer for you and this community is that God may continue to bless you with the work that lies ahead, that as you celebrate and remember, that you will continue to answer God's call for the next 166 years and beyond. May it be so. Amen.